All right, so you're here with us on the deep dive, and today we're going to be like really tackling something complex. And I know that you're here because you want to get right into it, like clear, efficient, thorough understanding
Oh, really?
of these complicated issues. So
Yeah.
today's all about kind of unpacking this whole thing with the United States and Puerto Rico, right? We've
Mhm.
got some seriously insightful material, honestly, that we've been looking at. And
Yeah, absolutely.
we're going to kind of like dive into the historical connections, obviously what's going on now,
Mhm.
and the potential futures too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the whole picture.
So our mission for this whole deep dive is really straightforward. We want to pinpoint the absolute most important knowledge when it comes to like what advantages has the US actually gotten from this relationship with Puerto Rico?
Right.
What are the limitations that Puerto Rico is dealing with because of its territorial status?
Yeah.
And then what could happen if Puerto Rico actually became a state?
Right. The
Oh.
impacts. Yeah.
We're looking at everything: economic benefits, strategic significance, the cultural contributions, what could change politically.
Totally. Yeah.
To get us started, though, I found this really interesting.
Okay.
So Puerto Rico, it's a pharmaceutical powerhouse.
Wow.
I mean, think about it. It produces 16 of the top 20 drugs that are sold right here in the U.S.
That's pretty incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that a little.
You know what's fascinating to me and something for you to kind of keep in mind as we go through this is that one fact really illustrates the deep level of integration that already exists between the United States and Puerto Rico, and it's something that people can easily overlook.
Yeah.
You know, just how significantly Puerto Rico contributes to the everyday lives of people, across the entire United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we start to look at the economic benefits for the U.S., this dominance in pharmaceutical production is,
Yeah,
it's a perfect example of that.
absolutely. I mean, 16 of the top 20, it's huge, right? And the analysis we're looking at here points out that that industry generates like a massive $48 billion annually for Puerto Rico, which is like almost half of the island's entire GDP.
Yeah.
It's not just about like local economic activity either, because a quarter of all U.S. pharmaceutical exports come from Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
We're talking major players like Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson. They all have huge operations there.
Right.
It really highlights how important of an economic engine Puerto Rico is for the U.S. Now, this dominance, this wasn't some accident, right? For
Right.
decades, there were these tax incentives that basically created like a haven for these pharmaceutical companies. Now, obviously, those specific incentives, they've changed, but the skilled workforce is there. The infrastructure is already in place.
Right.
And that remains a really significant asset.
Yeah.
This tells us something important about how policy can really shape economic landscapes, like even over the really long term.
Exactly. And if we kind of connect this back to the bigger picture for you, it's not just about, where these drugs are manufactured. It's about the stability of that supply chain.
Right.
It's about the specialized knowledge that has been developed on the island. And ultimately, it's about, the overall contribution to American healthcare
Right.
and beyond just the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
It's also vital to recognize that, Puerto Rico makes these direct financial contributions to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. Treasury collects over $4 billion every single year in federal taxes from Puerto Rico.
Wow.
And this is a crucial point.
Mm-hmm.
These are primarily payroll taxes, export duties, and commodity taxes.
Okay.
Because residents of Puerto Rico don't actually pay federal income tax on income that's earned within Puerto Rico.
So it's really not like what some people think, where it's all about the U.S. providing support.
Exactly.
Puerto Ricans are contributing financially
Yeah.
to the federal system.
Absolutely.
Now, the analysis that we're looking at also goes into the history of Puerto Rico being used as a corporate tax shelter.
Okay.
And specifically, it mentions Section 936. This can be a little complicated.
Yeah.
But basically, Section 936 allowed U.S. companies to not pay federal taxes on profits that were generated in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
So it made it a pretty big tax haven.
Yeah. That raises an important question for us to consider, though, which is
Yeah.
what was the true nature of these benefits?
Right.
So while Section 936 did stimulate some economic activity in Puerto Rico when it was in existence,
Right.
it was also widely criticized as being essentially a huge tax loophole.
Yeah.
And the analysis actually indicates that it cost the U.S. Treasury an estimated $30 to $40 billion every year
Wow.
until it was finally phased out in 2006.
Huge.
Yeah. So, while some U.S. corporations definitely experienced economic gains,
Right.
the overall impact on the U.S. federal budget was considerable.
Yeah. So a situation with both pros and cons, for sure.
Yeah.
Moving on, though, from the purely economic side of things.
Yeah.
The strategic military value of Puerto Rico is another key element here.
Right.
It's in a really strategic spot. It's a super important naval station right in the Caribbean. And for you, someone who's trying to really understand the full picture, understanding how important that location
Right.
is really essential to understanding, the broader U.S. interests in the whole region.
Precisely. And, that location provides the U.S. with, significant reach and the ability to kind of project its influence
Right.
in a really strategically vital part of the world.
Right.
And what's more, the analysis highlights a really compelling statistic that I think you'll find interesting.
Okay.
Puerto Ricans actually serve in the U.S. military at a significantly higher rate than any U.S. state.
Right.
Per capita. Yeah. 9.2% compared to the national average, which is only 6.3%.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It is, and this deep commitment to service is it's a substantial contribution to U.S. national security. It makes you wonder, what are some of the historical or cultural factors that might contribute to such an exceptionally high rate of military service?
That's a really good question. It really speaks volumes about the connection and the dedication of the people of Puerto Rico. And it's not just about military bases and personnel, though.
Right.
Puerto Rico is also crucial when it comes to trade and commerce.
Yeah.
They've got a bilingual workforce, strong cultural ties. It really makes it this natural gateway to Latin American markets for U.S. businesses.
Absolutely.
So beyond this significant contribution to our national security, Puerto Rico's unique position also makes it a key player in the economic landscape, particularly when we talk about trade.
What's interesting to consider here is how this facilitates international trade.
Right.
And strengthens those economic relationships throughout, the entire Americas.
Yeah.
And the sheer volume of interstate commerce involving Puerto Rico, which is tens of billions of dollars annually.
Wow.
Really underscores its importance in the U.S. economic system.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about financial figures and strategic maps, but the analysis also reminds us about the rich culture and the scientific contributions that come from Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Everything from its vibrant cuisine and arts to just its inherent bilingualism. The island really enriches the fabric of U.S. culture. Beyond just saying, cuisine, though.
Yeah.
What are some actual examples of Puerto Rican culinary traditions that have really, influenced American food culture?
Mofongo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pasteles.
Absolutely.
So good.
Yeah, and from a scientific standpoint,
Yeah.
Puerto Rico offers these really unique opportunities, particularly in areas like tropical medicine and biotechnology. The biodiversity there and the specific health challenges that are present on the island create this really valuable research environment that benefits the whole U.S. scientific community.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked a lot about how the U.S. has benefited from this relationship.
Right.
But for you to really have that well-rounded understanding, it's super important to also look at the other side and think about the historical exploitation of Puerto Rico's resources.
Yeah, absolutely.
The analysis points out that U.S. policies haven't always put sustainable development in Puerto Rico first.
And this is a critical point.
Yeah.
If we look back at Operation Bootstrap,
Yeah.
which was, this plan to industrialize Puerto Rico by attracting U.S. corporations with tax breaks.
Right.
What happened was it kind of inadvertently created a dependency on these federal incentives.
Oh, wow.
And when those incentives shifted or disappeared, the Puerto Rican economy often faced instability as a result.
So this period of, all these tax benefits, it spurred some growth, but then it ended.
Right.
So how did that shift impact Puerto Rico's economy and set the stage for some of the constraints that we see today?
Yeah, it's a really important connection to make.
And we can't forget about the impact of those pharmaceutical tax loopholes that we talked about earlier. While they did bring industry to the island, that massive amount of tax avoidance, those $30 to $40 billion annual losses for the U.S. Treasury, really shows us a system that was, in a lot of ways, exploitative in how it was set up.
Absolutely. And, another example of this is the historical shift in agriculture.
Okay.
In the early 20th century, there were policies that pushed Puerto Rico away from a diverse agricultural base of coffee and tobacco and towards a sugar monoculture.
Okay.
And this actually had some really significant negative consequences for local food systems and created economic vulnerabilities.
Now, even with these historical challenges, even with the exploitation,
Yeah.
the analysis is very clear that Puerto Rico continues to be a huge source of revenue for the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking over $4 billion a year
Right.
through various federal taxes,
Yeah.
even without that federal income tax on the money that they make locally.
Right.
So for you just trying to understand those economic ties, remember that $4 billion in taxes.
It's a big number.
It shows that it's not just one-sided,
Right. It's not just about receiving.
Right.
It's about contributing as well.
Exactly. And then when we look at some specific sectors, like the over $29 billion in chemical and biotech products
Yeah.
produced in 2022 alone,
Yeah.
the benefit to the U.S. healthcare system is obvious.
Absolutely.
I mean, these aren't just some random numbers.
Right.
This is about essential medicines for people all over the country.
Yeah.
And let's not forget that amazing statistic, the 9.2% military participation rate.
Right.
That's a huge ongoing contribution.
Yeah.
A consistent source of dedicated personnel serving in every branch of the U.S. Armed Forces.
Absolutely. Now, shifting our focus a little bit to the future,
Yeah.
the analysis makes a very compelling case for how statehood for Puerto Rico could actually strengthen the United States
Okay.
in a number of ways.
I'm interested. Let's hear it.
Let's start by looking at the potential economic benefits. The analysis suggests that by applying federal income taxes to residents of Puerto Rico, which they don't currently pay on income earned locally,
Right.
and by closing any remaining corporate tax loopholes, statehood could generate an additional $10 billion or more in federal revenue every year.
So that's a big boost.
Yeah, it's significant.
Yeah.
And beyond that direct revenue increase, statehood could also play a really crucial role in stabilizing Puerto Rico's economy,
Which has been struggling.
which has been struggling, yeah.
For a while.
The island currently faces this massive debt burden of about $140 billion.
Yeah.
So becoming a state could facilitate more effective debt restructuring
Okay.
and create a more stable environment for economic growth.
So it's not just about bringing in more money. It's
Right.
about fixing the underlying problems.
Exactly.
And there's also the potential for increased interstate commerce,
Absolutely.
which is significant. The analysis suggests that full integration could unlock over $21 billion in real estate growth
Wow.
and could lead to expanded manufacturing partnerships.
It's about creating a level playing field
Right.
and really fostering greater economic exchange.
So from a strategic point of view,
Wow.
statehood offers some really clear advantages.
Absolutely.
By fully integrating Puerto Rico, the U.S. would be positioning it as an even stronger cultural and economic bridge to Latin America,
Right.
and that would enhance U.S. soft power in a super important region.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It would solidify those ties that already exist and really
Yeah.
project this image of partnership
Right.
and
yeah.
shared prosperity.
Yeah.
Plus, the analysis points out that permanent statehood would guarantee long-term U.S. access to those strategically vital Caribbean military bases.
Right, which is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are the moral and political aspects to think about.
Absolutely.
You know, the current territorial status of Puerto Rico has been a point of international discussion for a long time.
Yeah.
So granting statehood would address those concerns.
It would, and it's about aligning,
Yeah.
our actions with our stated ideals
Right.
of equality and representation.
Absolutely. And then on like a practical political level,
Yeah.
the analysis points out that statehood would probably mean adding 2 senators and 4 to 5 representatives to the U.S. Congress.
Right.
So this would make the legislative branch more accurately reflect
Right.
the diversity of the nation
Yeah.
and the voices of all of its citizens.
Absolutely.
And then finally, we can't understate the cultural enrichment
Yeah.
that statehood would bring.
Right.
You know, integrating Puerto Rico's 3.2 million U.S. citizens more fully into the nation would be a really powerful celebration of its amazing Latino heritage.
Yeah.
And it would just make the national identity of the U.S. even richer.
It's about embracing the diversity
Yeah.
that makes the country stronger.
So to kind of bring it all together,
Yeah.
what we've seen in this deep dive is a really long and complex relationship.
Absolutely.
The U.S. has definitely gotten substantial economic, strategic, cultural benefits from Puerto Rico over time.
Mhm.
But at the same time, the island's territorial status has created some serious constraints and sometimes led to, practices that were honestly exploitative.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, the analysis strongly suggests that statehood isn't just about righting past wrongs.
Right.
It's actually a path to making both sides stronger.
Yeah.
It offers potential economic gains, strategic advantages, and important moral and political benefits for the whole U.S.
It really underscores the idea that a more fully integrated Puerto Rico,
Mm-hmm.
with all the rights and responsibilities of statehood,
Mm.
could go from being a territory that has sometimes been treated as just a resource to be extracted from
Yeah.
to a full and equal partner contributing even more to the nation's prosperity and security.
So here's a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
Based on all of this, given these already deep economic and strategic ties,
Yeah.
and thinking about how both sides could benefit,
Hmm?
what do you think are the biggest remaining hurdles
Yeah.
to achieving this more fully integrated future
Hmm.
between the U.S. and Puerto Rico?
It's a question that really makes you think about how complex this is
Absolutely.
and all the different perspectives that need to
Yeah.
be considered.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
I really appreciate your insights.
Absolutely anytime.
This is a topic I think we'll be revisiting.
Yeah, for sure.
So much more to explore here.
I think so.
But for now, we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.